Okay, so my next build is going to be this little thing here. A very strange kit. The background on this kit is we have a local vendor here in Ottawa that has once a year kind of a flea market. People bring their models for sale, trade, whatever. And at the last event this past summer, I was looking around and I saw this. I've never seen anything like it. The Goodyear Blimp. Had no idea this thing existed. Now, this is a pretty beat up box, but it was only, $15 Canadian. And, I took a quick look at it and I saw right away this is not an ordinary kit whatsoever. This kit has, a little motor somewhere in here. And if I can find it. And these weird sheets, which I'll explain in a second. Okay, so here's, a whole gear mechanism. It's got a motor. It's got, incandescent bulbs. And what's supposed to happen is that it has its own signage. And this thing kind of works like a light bright, where you have this paper and you poke holes. And this rotating mechanism would flash in front of this with the lights in the back, and you see these signs. And there's a little pad in here where there were some pre-made ones if you want to use them. And it just rotates around, and you would see this, whatever, the pre-made ones are your own, design your own. Anyhow, very, very strange. Now, I took one look at this kit, and I said, I'm not going to do this. At first, I was saying I'm just going to enhance it, put LEDs, and try to maybe have just like a simple sign, because again, this is gonna probably break over time. It's gonna be noisy, it's gonna be clunky, but I said I know I can do something with it. So I picked up this kit, and the first thing I did is look for what I can put in there. Some LED matrices, or a matrix. Ironically, at the same time, I thought of this. Another builder, a YouTube channel that I always follow, is Granpa Mark's Hobbies. And he had the same kit, and he had just, started doing it when I was basically doing my research. So I'll put a link into his video, because he used the mechanism. I think he made some modifications, but he used that mechanism for that sign. But I said I want to do something different if I can, and I looked around a bit to see what's available electronics wise that I can replace that. And I came up with this thing that you boot up. Give me a second here. It's got a battery indicator, the number, and you can put whatever you want. And I'm hoping you can see that on the video. It's still in the bag. But this is flexible, like this, this bends. And I thought that was really cool. And I took some, crude measurements to say, what do I need to fill that hole? And would this fit in there? And I can do something with that. So that's what I'm going to do. And this thing was cheap. This was, I think, when I bought it, was like $17 Canadian from AliExpress. So I'll put the link to that in my notes. And you can get different ones, different colors, multicolor, and this is just the white model, and I think it actually does other colors. Now, the way you control this thing, again, you can charge this with a USB. It's got a lithium ion in there, and then you use Bluetooth with an app to control what you want displayed. Now, I'm not going to show you the app because I'm using my phone that has the app to record this video, but you can see what I mean, and you can go online and see what it, some of the options for this kind of stuff. So it's really cool, but the next problem I had was, well, what am I going to do with this? How do I put it in? How do I wire it? How do I power it? Do I put something, where I have this USB charger in there and, make a slot for that? And I thought that's not the best thing to do, because I have to somehow support this anyhow. And I didn't want to use like the crude little display stand where it's low on the ground. I figured this thing, it's a blimp. It should be up in the air and have a kind of a base where it's floating over something. And I'm saying, I need something to hold this up. Now, there's a few things I can do, but I went into my, tickle trunk of parts, and this comes from an old lamp. And this is very sturdy. I know I can pass wires in here. Basically, I have to do something with 4 wires. And my idea is you put this in the base, the box, pass the wires up along here, and just the display goes into this model over here, and make sure I can access the on-off button from there, and I can still access it to charge this over here. Now, this is a little bit of an overkill. I was actually looking around yesterday with the model car minion in a hobby shop. I could use other smaller brass tubes, but my main concern is the decals over here, and they're not really decals. This is the third kit in a row where I don't have real decals, unfortunately. These are kind of like the peel and stick ones. But I did want to keep at least one Goodyear sign, and that would go in the back over here, where you can still see that it says Goodyear. So I'll have to see if I can put this maybe somewhere where it's not going to be too intrusive and still have that sign, and have it mounted on a base like this over something. And I said, well, what do you put over it? And I've seen some people who make airplane models, and what they do is they put below it on the base an aerial view of something, you know, on the ground. And I was thinking, this is the Goodyear Blimp. A lot of history to it. Basically, it shows up at, you know, sporting events or other special events. And I figure, what can I have below it? And I was thinking, well, in Montreal you have Ile Notre Dame, where they had Expo 67, and this is, you know, a vintage old style Goodyear blimp, and this is the kind of blimp that was actually over the World's Fair in Montreal in 1967. So I started looking around. I said, I think I can find an aerial view of that island where it was held, which is also where they hold the F1 races annually, and put that on the bottom of the base, so it's basically hovering over that. So I've got a few reference photos that I found. The hard part is when you're looking for aerial views, it's usually at an angle, but again, this needs to be a flat because it's just really directly above it. So I got to figure out what I'm going to do with the base, what I'm going to do with this, and build this kit, because otherwise, once I gut this and this, which I won't need, it's a very simple kit, really. There's not much to it. My hardest part, or is making sure I have this secured somehow in the back, and that I basically, unfortunately, there's no, I don't think I can find that attachment. I'm probably going to end up just snipping these wires and putting extension cable with, you know, some different sort of connector. So, strange kit. Crossing fingers, it'll look nice at the end. So those of you who've been watching my channel for a while, you know that I like to do a little research and delve into the history or add information about my model subjects. You might get a little edumacated over here, so be careful. So the Goodyear Blimp, I think most people know what it is. You've probably seen it at some major sporting event, watching TV, seeing it flying around, or the Olympics. And it's been around since 1925. So if you do the math, you got 1925, 1926, 1927, 21, 2022, 2023, 2024, 2025. So if you add all that up and do the math, it's 100 years. So quite an institution. Now the kit itself has, what you see here is actually the few parts I'll be using. A lot of parts go into, you know, the motorization, the mechanism that, you know, spins the display that originally came with the kit. So in the end, we're just left with these few parts that I'm going to be using. But even with these few parts, I'm going to need obviously some modifications. Now, in order to get this display up into the ship over here, the first thing I have to do, because it's such a flexible one, and I want to make sure it's got a solid basing. So I basically went out, cut out a piece of acrylic over here. I think it was from a chocolate box, and another backing. And what I'm gonna do is wedge it between these two, and, you know, have that clamped down somehow, and glued in so it's facing the display port over here, the window. Now the window itself, interestingly enough, comes with this mesh. And the reason the kit has this mesh is because if you use their mechanism and the sheets that go with it, as it rolls around, you'll see it's kind of like lights going off and on. And that was the intent over there. But in my case, if I keep this mesh in front of this, it's not going to work out. I'm going to be blocking LEDs or have partial ones. It'll just, it can't be here. So what I have to do, or what I've done, is I've taken a piece of acrylic at the same size, and that will be glued in over here in this little, insert, if you can get it in there. It's kind of a little tough, and it's actually a little tough because the acrylic I chose is a little more rigid than this one, so I might get another thinner piece of acetate, I should say, not acrylic, acetate. So I have to do, I will be doing that. I might even be adding a little supports in here, gluing them so that it doesn't pop out over time back into the model. And the reason I want to make sure it is secured is because I have to decide what to do in terms of gluing this together. Now, the original kit ran on 2D batteries, and it had, these are D battery kits if you haven't seen them. So they're very heavy and bulky, and they had this whole battery holder that went in with the mechanism with the roller. And because of that, the ship as designed, the model as designed, is not to be, well, parts of it are glued, but most of it, this here, isn't glued. It's supposed to open up later on when you need to change the batteries. And I've got to decide now, do I glue it? Because I'm not going to have batteries. I'm going to have that wiring going down to the control board for the display. And I don't think I need to, have it open. And there's some ugly seams if you do try to just use their method over here. It's not very nice. So what I think I'm going to do is once I have the display in here, nice and solid, mounted, I might have to trim off these stanchions over here that they use for screws to hold their mechanism. Make sure mine fits, and then I think what I'm going to do is once it's all glued up, I'll mask off the display area and then, putty and paint it so it's nice and clean. One thing I noticed about the kit is, despite all the other parts they had the unfortunate decision was made to put the Revell logo and the year 1983 over here. So I'll have to, sand that off, but not too much of a big deal. Now this thing over here comes with these two little pieces, and these are supposed to be are the propellers, and they're really ugly. I know that some airplane modelers, what they do if they want to simulate a propeller in motion, is they take a clear piece of round plastic and put that in front, and it simulates a spinning, propeller. So I went through my stash of, clear washers, and I really don't have anything appropriate for the size, to the inner diameter. Although I had one that's really close, and this is actually a mica. I don't know if you could see that sheen over there, and this would have been perfect, but unfortunately I only have one. So I'll probably have to make my own out of acetate. One other thing I'm thinking of doing is, because I'll have the 4 wires coming in here, 2 of them are the power. You can see usually the black and the red is, the ground and the positive. I'm going to measure that to see what voltage I have out of there, because I'm going to have to break it out anyhow, and I'll have access to that voltage. And I think what I'm going to do is put a little blinking light. I've looked at some video footage where they have usually a red blinking light, and I could probably put a flashing LED circuit in here and put it at the same time. I mean, why not? When this thing is on, if it only powers at that time, then I could have a little extra bit of realism. So the last thing I want to show you was this, and this is the inner mechanism that came with the kit, with the motor. And just to give you an idea of how loud it is, if you actually did use their motor, you can see the fast spinning, slower, and this little one over here is the slowest one, which was for the rotor. You probably can't even hear me talking with this thing on. It screams like a banshee. So glad I'm not using that is all I can say. Okay, so this project's been crawling, but at least I'm slowly making progress. Want to mention that I did create those propellers out of acetate, and they're so much better than the clunky ones provided with the kit. So I'm really happy with that. Actually, I just cut that out with a scissors, and I kind of went on the outer mark. I used the template to make the circle, and I cut around it, and I actually like the fact that you can still see the contour. When it's going to be installed, it'll look more like a propeller. Okay, let me get rid of these before I lose them and talk about the other stuff I got here. I made the base over here with the photo of Ile Saint Helene. Mod Podged it to glue it to a base. I made a hole where I'm going to have the stand that's gonna hold up the blimp, and another one that will have my little mini controller under it to power it on and off. Now it's this is a fairly thick board over here, so I'm gonna put a little piece of plastic on top of that button so that it's closer to the same height, so it's easier to turn on and off, but it does work. Now if you noticed over here, actually before I get to that, I want to talk about my pocket. So in the place where the display is going to be held, I created kind of a pocket where this is going to go in there to secure it, to make it flat. I think I mentioned that in one of the earlier segments. And it's just a piece of clear plastic from I think it was a box, whatever. And I put some around the bottom and on the side like stoppers, so that it has some height, and I will be gluing on another board over here so it really fits snugly between the two. Now, to hold this in place, what I've done is taken pieces of CD case, which I love to take apart and reuse the acrylic, and I'll be putting one on this end here and one on that end there, and I basically cut out the rough shape of the contour on the inside, and more or less so that it'll be nice and level, at a set angle. Now I've also went back, and I think I mentioned that I want to, this is thicker as acetate, this is thinner, so I now have a thinner piece that I could use as the window. But once that's in, and it'll have to be in place once I secure the display, there's no going back. Now, unfortunately, that means either I try to tape that up when I paint this thing and prime it, or I do the painting and primer before. Now, I don't think I can, because if I put tape on this, as I would remove the tape, I can see, it's going to pop off, and then it'll be inside if I try, to seal the whole model. So I think what I'm going to do is go pre-paint it and glue it afterwards all up together. I'll just do the fins, have them all puttied and everything before I paint that. And later on, if I can, kind of like what I did with the Nautilus submarine, the non-traditional one, and see if I can, if putty is needed, and try to give it another paint job. And if it's good enough, then it's good enough. I won't putty that and just glue it as is. I wanted to say also, I'm going to be using, this is very, very bright. I don't know if you remember when I turned it on. It's quite bright, and I want to dim it down and diffuse it a bit. Now, this is a piece from an anti-static bag, and even though it's anti-static, it is non-conductive. I made sure about that. And what I'm going to do is going to put a piece in here with that, once I have that pocket, so that it's a little dimmer and more diffused. And again, when you look inside, you won't just see a bunch of LEDs. It'll look a little darker, right? So I mean, it'll still be there, but it'll be harder to notice that there's LEDs in there, and that way it'll look more realistic when it lights up. So now getting to the electronics, as I mentioned, I need to separate the controller and add a much longer wire that'll go through this tube over here, and what I used for that was actually a network cable. If you ever had a network cable like this, especially one that's got, a busted end or something like that, you can crimp on another end, but I mean, why bother? Because these cables are everywhere, and they're, most people end up throwing them out often enough. And in here, there's basically, 8 strands of network cables, 4 pairs. And I'm only using 2 over here. As you can see, because I had, a certain pattern of the ribbon cable going with the original display, I just said, okay, what's my my mapping? Basically, black is going to be green, yellow to striped green, and at the other end it'll be the opposite. So it's basically attached as it was before. So don't throw out your cables. They're really easy to strip, and you get flexible cable out of this, really handy, and you get a lot. Now, on that note, I also mentioned that I was hoping that when I saw the red and the black over here, that was just a power source, that when it's switched on, you get 5 volts or whatever, and I was gonna use that source at the same time to drive an LED. But as it turns out, that's not the case. This is not a power supply that turns off and on when this thing is on. As a matter of fact, it was kind of strange. I think it was between one of those wires and one of the inner wires that I had a 4-volt potential, but it was not switched, meaning when this was off, no matter what, there was 4 volts there. And that's because this is a proprietary channel between them, and who knows what the mapping is and how those pins work. I didn't want to decode all that. So it's just, if I don't have a clear source that's on and off with this switch, then I really don't want to put extra cabling and an extra power source to have just a simple LED. So I'm going to forego the LED from now, and I'm just going to have this internally to be used for the display, and that's it. And so that's the progress right now. Again, it's going a lot slower because I'm actually doing a bunch of things with my work area, my bench at the same time. I'm expanding another, in the back over here with an extra table, and that's taking some time away from me. But slowly, surely, we're getting there. So as you can see, the body's now painted. I ended up using this Deco Art Silver Morning paint. Craft paint. Not the best job. I mean, it still looks fine, but I was trying a new airbrush and a new formula for thinning this stuff that worked really well. Just like I said, getting used to the airbrush. So I'm happy enough with it. It's looks fine. I've also drilled in the hole for the pipe stand that will go in there. I have to align that up to see exactly what the angle would be when it's being held, and happy with that. Now, the window is glued in here. As I mentioned before, I had the supports on the side that's going to hold the piece that's going to hold this piece, the pocket. And what I've done is I used Wellbond to put the first, the plastic in there. Actually took a weight that's one of those 1, 2, 3 blocks to weigh it down so it's nice and snug. And then after it was dry, I said I don't want this thing popping up over time. Wellbond is a PVA glue, and it is one of the better ones, but I said it might dry out over time. So what I did is I took little strips of styrene and basically went around the edge, so it's now it can't pop up because this is really glued to the body, and there's no way that's gonna pop out. So I'm happy with that. Now, I was still looking at what I can do for the diffusion, and in other related video, I was questioning still, do I go with this stuff? It's kind of weird to pop it in, and how do I hold it, and how many layers and all that. So I was doing a little experimentation, and I saw another video where the Bearded Guy Jeff Lawless, he was smoking acetate to, or actually in his case it was styrene, clear plastic styrene, to give it a smoked look for a car. And I thought, this is an idea that I should try, maybe that I can do over here. So I took one of those acetates and I just airbrushed some smoke on it and said, let me give it a try. So I did a quick test with the LEDs functional, and more or less the same distance, moved it up and down a bit to see what kind of effect I would get with this. And unfortunately, this just spreads, it diffuses it too much. It basically blurs out the LEDs. So, Good try, but it didn't work out for me. So it was back to the acetate. The anti-static bags. And again, I said, well, what do I do there? And again, I did a really quick test with as clean a bag as I can find in all my bags to see, you know, without blemishes. And I did a quick test with that. And this is 2 layers because it's actually still the bag. And I'm kind of happy with that. I'm just worried that it's not as smooth as I would have had with something like this, but I think it's the best I can do. So the question now is, do I just put it as a, you know, in that slot, that pocket I was going to build, or did build, that's going to be holding that, and put it in between? But at the same time, I says you can kind of see around when you look inside here. You'll see, oh, it's, you know, up in the air, and there's something there, and I can see behind it. So I was hoping actually I can get this right in there, up against the, you know, so-called window. And it's going to be a little tricky, and I'm thinking that's my best option, so that it really covers the entire window, and it hides as much as it can, and you see a little less just looking into it. And I probably will be doing that, where I just glue this in around the edges, and I'm hoping I don't get, you know, warped edges, and that it stays kind of flat as to the, you know, glass as much as possible. But we'll have to see if that really holds out. The last thing I want to mention was I kind of made a little bit of a gaffe. So I've mentioned Ile Sainte-Hélène, and also I've called it Ile Notre Dame. And the truth is that Expo 67, the World's Fair, was actually held on both of those islands. Now this is Ile Notre Dame, and this is Ile Sainte-Hélène, St. Helens Island. And believe it or not, these are mostly artificial islands that they were building the subway system in Montreal in that same year, or leading up to 1967. And everything they excavated from the subway system is what they used to create most of this island. Like, this was just really this piece over here. All this was artificial, and all this was made afterwards, as well as most of this stuff over here. Now, the gaff I did is usually the orientation is like this. And, this way. And I should have put this hole over here, and I should have put that hole over there. But no biggie. It's just going to be an inverted world as we live in today. So, progress. Still a lot of work to be done. All right, a quick update to show you what I've done to the blimp since the last segment. First of all, I painted the black interior for what will be the rear of the display. So again, you don't get to see, I'm trying to keep it as dark as possible on the inside, so you don't see anything until the LEDs pop up. So that'll help a bit there. Now, a whole bunch of things about this part over here. I ended up gluing, a little dirty here, the anti-static, as I mentioned in the last segment, and try to keep it as smooth as possible with the curvature, and that's 2 layers over there. Now, after I basically taped in the sides over here, I said, you know, I tried gluing it first, and I tried, you know, Rogue's Gallery of Glues. I tried the Well Bond. That didn't really stick to the anti-static bag itself at all. Contacta, nothing. CA glue, nothing. Tamiya Ultra Thin, nothing. The old vintage Testers glue, nothing. Basically, nothing would stick to this stuff. So, what I did is I taped a few points over here with the Tamiya mask tape, which is very, you know, a good tape in its own right. And I said, I still got to put something to make sure that this doesn't, you know, dry out over time, and then this thing will be flopping in. So what I did is I just took epoxy and I put it along the seams on the side over here. The thinking being that it's going to basically just hold it down no matter what. So this epoxy is not going anywhere. So again, I think I've solved that problem, and I hope so. What can I say? It's all I can do, because nothing sticks to this stuff. Then I looked at, you know, my controller over here. Again, this has to go under the board, and with this is going to be the on-off switch. And I said I need something to hold this thing in, and I found something nearly perfect, which is a a case from an old mini cassettes, audio cassettes from way back in the day. And this fit in perfectly. Like, it's snug on, this side and this side. The depth is a little on the short side, but that was okay. And I glued another backing over here, so it's really in there. This is just going to make it easier for me to now glue this instead of gluing this directly on the bottom over here. I'm still going to figure out how to do that, but there's a lot of options. And again, I just didn't want to glue this thing directly on there. Now, another thing I want to show you is the pocket I've been talking about for a while. So you see how this thing slides in? And again, here's a nice clear. That'll be, now I can glue it right onto those two little end pieces that I put in last time. And that'll glue right on top. But again, I'm always worried about this thing flopping around. Eventually maybe the glue will dry out and it'll start, it'll loosen. And then, once it's in there, I can't fix it. So what I'm going to do, if you see some strings over here, what I've done is I've basically wired up put little holes into these little stands that I put. And I've just put some clear nylon from the craft store. And what I'm going to do is, once this thing is glued in there, I can do kind of like a crisscross over both sides and also kind of like an X in the middle. So that thing really isn't going to go anywhere after that. A bit of an overkill, but I'd rather be safe than sorry, because again, once it's in there, I don't want to hear it rattling around and having to take it apart. At least that's the idea. You can see over here, I still have a remnant, but I tried to glue it, and you just peels this off. This doesn't stick to anything. So a little more progress, still a ways to go. All right, before I assemble everything, I just want to give a quick bird's eye view of what we've got so far over here and to show you the inner workings or how it's going to look like. And I put a little stub on the switch so it'll pop out once I have it on the board. And basically you boot her up. Battery needs a little more charge. That's the Bluetooth code, I believe. And again, this is what I've got now. One thing I regret is I put 2 layers of that anti-static bag. I think one would have been enough now. I think when I was doing it, I was putting it right on the LED, so it seemed a little bit brighter. But, with that extra distance, it does, dissipate a little bit more. If you turn off all the lights, or some of them, you'll see it's a lot brighter. So it's not too bad. Again, I think it would have been fine with just one anti-static bag, but now that it's in there, there's no way I can take that off. So again, now I've just got to assemble all the rest together, put it on its base, pass the wire through the pipe over there, and just mount this on the baseboard. All right, the Goodyear Blimp is more or less all done now. It's taken a long time getting here for a number of reasons. It's taken over a month, but this is it. I just want to show what I've done so far. As you can see, I don't have any of the stickers up on the front, but what I did do was put one in the back. Again, these are just peel off stickers. You can see they're not the best. I tried to burr them in as much as possible. I don't even know if they're last. So given that, I don't think I think they'll start peeling off over time, I decided not to go with all the rest over here, even though it would make it look a little bit better. I just didn't want to take that chance. Now, going on the back over here, originally when I showed this pipe was supposed to go right in there. But of course I had to, roughly judge the angle to put it in. And when I put this directly, this was kind of facing too low. So I had to try to say, is there something I can do on the inside or the outside to basically tilt that angle? And it was really a lot tougher than I thought. And then I remembered when I took this apart from a lamp, there was this other little piece that actually has a ball swivel. And that saved everything because I was able to prop it. And as you can see right now, it's pretty much at its limit, tilted upwards. And this way you can see that it's, pretty much in line to have this thing straight. And it works. And my second worry was once I had that, because it's another inch or an inch and a half extruding it outwards, I thought that this base was going to be too small and it would be, you know, too far over the middle, but it's pretty much on the center. So I was actually starting to build another base saying this is not going to work, but then I said, let me give it a try. And then I looked at it and not too bad. Now, I didn't put any other paint. I didn't, you know, put any panel line accents. I just left it gray as is. And one of the reasons is I want this to be the focus. I don't want everything else to be the focus. And let me boot it up now. You can see I've this has been like over a month and this thing still holds the charge. That's just the Bluetooth channel. And you know, I changed the words a bit. I don't know if you can see that there. Actually, maybe I can turn this off and you can see a little bit better. Oops. Too many lights. How about that? And again, it's not too bad. I was worried it wouldn't be bright enough, but you can clearly see it in a room even with regular lighting. And I'm happy how that turned out. Again, it was really finicky getting everything in there, but a little trial and error, going back, changing a few things, it works. So the only thing I'm going to do now is I probably put something in the front because you can see kind of like the wire sticking out over here. But this is all solid. You can see there's the button. And I'll probably just put something in front. So to cover that a bit and just leave this USB exposed, which is where you charge this thing. So that's it. I'll have a few glamour shots in the end. Oh, I want to mention really, really quickly that I'm not going to talk about the app, but basically, this is basically the sheet you get from instructions, but what you see here is not always the capability of each one of these displays. So some of them have this thing where you can make playlists and, you know, make a text scrolling thing that you want, whatever you want, and then the graphics and animations and all that, but it depends on the firmware inside. So this basic one that I have is just one color, and you can't have that playlist. You can have up to 160 characters scrolling, so I could actually make this longer, but you're limited to 160 characters, 12 by 48 on that display. So I hope you enjoyed it. I keep on saying the next one will be a little quicker. Sometimes it's true, sometimes it's not, but I have two quick ones that are going to be group builds coming up next. And I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you for the next model.